What's up, guys? So today I am going to revisit my high school transcript to see if it was as good as I remember. I'm pretty sure it was, given that it is pretty easy to remember given that my grades did not fluctuate very much. I will look for my elementary school and middle school ones. I have to dig them up somewhere. Off the top of my head, I don't know where they went, but I know I have them. And I think that the high school one is probably the most relevant, given that is the highest education I ever had access to. I would love to show you the paper itself, but it has a lot of identifiable personal information, such as fucking social security, name, last name, address. Do I really want to dox myself? I'm just going to tell you guys which classes I took and what my grade was ultimately, and any memories that I may have of those classes. We're gonna go back to my freshman year. I had to take a class called Academic Enrichment because I was never very good at math, and I was expressing that I was worried about me entering algebra 1, and how I was finding it kind of difficult to cope with, because not only did I have algebra, but I also had English honors, and that was a pretty heavy class. It was a demanding class workload wise, so I was requesting some kind of tutoring. But weirdly enough, I don't understand how this class worked, because it's supposed to be you're at this class, you're working on your homework, if you have questions you ask your teacher, but somehow you were graded on this class, and I ended this class with an 87, which where I live, the 80s range is a B. I'm not sure if this is across the board in the United States, but just so you know, I will specify every single time, just to not assume that every state is the same. I will let you know what ranking that is, what category that is. Algebra 1, somehow I ended up with a better grade in Algebra 1 than my academic enrichment class. I ended Algebra 1 with a 90. And 90 is a high B. It's not quite an A. For some reason, we had different scales in different schools that I attended. We could do 90% throughout, all the way up to 100. That would be the A scale. But I did go to some schools where the A started at 93. This, ending it with a 90, meant that I ended it with a B, which was surprising for me in a math class to have a high B as opposed to like a B that's like an 85, 86. Ninth grade English honors, I ended that class with a 92, and I was livid. I thought, why? I was just one fucking point away. I'm not saying the teacher should have done favors for me, but she is the teacher who... Did I make a video about her? Anyway, she was difficult, and I get the impression that she really did not know how to handle kids who were, let's just say, different. But at the same time, that is a very serious accusation that I could be making if I don't have evidence to support it. Basically, I looked at it as, I noticed that she would treat the rich white kids in class a certain way. She herself comes from that background, I guess. But then the rest of us who were like low income, you can't tell exactly what we are. We are like ambiguous. Any other minorities, like, sure, any minorities who acted like extra, sure, maybe she could bond with them a little better or something, but at least at the beginning of the semester I picked up on it, and somehow toward the end of the semester, maybe in an effort to prepare us for the final exam, and it's in her best interest that we all do well and not, for some reason a certain group in your class didn't fare well, what happened? I think that she began to mellow out toward the end of the semester. But I remember her, she wasn't particularly kind. And I remember that sometimes I would ask her questions because I legitimately didn't grasp some things, and she seemed annoyed that I was asking questions. If you're a teacher who minds kids asking you questions, don't teach. Music Theory 1, I ended that class with a 95, which means I made an A. And music theory was kind of difficult. It wasn't what I expected. I guess I did not know the meaning of music theory until I got into this class, but I really thought that it was going to be a very instrument driven class, but instead this was more about the theory of music, knowing about music on paper in written form. My teacher was the one to be the performer most of the time. Like, say, triads on paper look like this. You work with them like this. Auditorily, they sound like this. And she would play it. And we had like piano keys printed on pieces of paper because not everyone in class had access to a piano, of course. And now I wonder if I learned music theory the way I did in that school because we didn't have pianos for everybody in class the way I did in middle school. And now I wonder if we were supposed to, but we never did because our resources were scarce, or if this is how music theory is supposed to be taught. You're not supposed to have access to instruments. I don't know. My teacher was excellent. She was fantastic. She was great. I learned so much. And a lot of those lessons I still retain to this day. Even if I don't know how to work with it, even if I'm not a composer right now, I can remember words. I know what they mean. I know what's happening on the sheet. And I owe that to her. That is the farthest I have ever gotten into a music education that involves learning how to read music and things like that. And to this day, I can label the staff treble clef. I know that the first line on the bottom is E and then followed by F. The first space from the bottom is F, and I will never forget it. Environmental Earth Science. I made a 98. Environmental Earth Science is essentially geology, but it's not quite geology centered. It's got more things related to it, but this encompassed many things. And as you can imagine, that was my favorite class out of the whole year. Health and PE, I made 100. If you don't make 100 in health and PE, you're just deliberately getting a bad grade in that class. Spanish, 1. I made 100 because, again, if you cannot do well in classes like that, those are very easy, simple, laid back. What are you doing? And then World History Honors, I made a 97. That surprised me because not only was it an honors class, but it was world history. And if I am especially ignorant in a social studies class, it has to be world history. I really don't know much history about Asia. I don't know much history about Europe, except for the settlement, the whole pilgrimage migration over here and conquering this side of the globe over here. But outside of that, I'm more ignorant than anything. And especially when we started discussing things like religion and the 100 Years' War, the French Revolution, shit like that. I remember those words, I remember those terms, but I don't remember shit. I remember how some kings and or queens, that little instrument for butchering people that begins with a G that maybe YouTube would be sensitive about, those were used to make heads literally roll. The plague, I don't remember what year it happened. Pompeii, I know that's probably from like prehistory, things like that. My world history retention sucked, and I can tell you that Africa, we never went over Africa during this class. What is world history without Africa, like the mother continent? So world history is more Eurocentric history, put it that way. And I didn't realize that until years after I left school. So that was the end of my 9th grade. Now let's visit my 10th grade. Civics and economics, I made a 99. This class, I wish I would have taken it a little more challenging. I wish I would have taken the, I guess, honors version of it. And on top of that, we had a very good teacher. I can't remember if there was such thing as AP Civics and Economics, but looking back, if that was an option, I think that's the one I would have opted for. I think I was up for the challenge. I loved civics. Economics, it wasn't my favorite side of the subject, but the civics part, I just loved it. Economics, all that it taught you was the differences between the 3 main forms of economies: capitalism, communism, socialism. Communism bad, capitalism good, socialism in between. And when you look back at those times, you can tell how biased your textbooks were because it just focused on how capitalism is good for innovation, good for making people rich, this and that. But when you critically think about what it means to be a capitalistic society, it never mentions the costs on people, the sacrifices that you make, how wealth distribution is not even, how you cannot just work yourself to death and make it work because you have to be working yourself to death in the right place. And sometimes work that isn't even labor intensive is better compensated, better paid than work that you can actually see the fruit of. You can actually see it translating into something that you can perceive its value. Management to me, they don't matter. Like white collar workers to me, they usually don't have a meaningful impact that I can observe. Whereas blue collar workers, I can see the impact that they have. So it's one of those things that I wish this class would have addressed better. But now as an adult, I'm still grateful for the foundation I had from this class. I'm just sad that our textbooks have a very biased way of expressing this, describing this. And especially with communism, when I think about communism, I'm like, communism doesn't sound so bad. Everybody is kind of like equal. Isn't that what we're trying to fight for? Equality and shit. But I do understand what the problems are with communism. Don't get me wrong. I personally always felt like socialism was the one that aligned with my values better. But it was something that the book and even my teacher, I guess under a degree of pressure, had to present it as socialism still has its problems. Capitalism is good 100%. So I left this class believing that capitalism was the best way to go, that we are the heroes in history, and that anything else like communism is just bad and couldn't be further from the truth. English 10, I took the regular version of that. I was so traumatized by my ninth grade experience that I decided to downgrade myself and take the, you could say, college prep slow version of English. And in a sense, I'm glad that I took this class because even though it was college prep, it was still pretty challenging. My 10th grade English class was the most challenging I had experienced since maybe, you could say, 6th grade. I remember 6th grade, something about it, maybe it's because I'm transitioning into middle school and suddenly it's like, oh, the boss level went up in this battle, right? But this class, because of the teacher we had, she was pretty intense with some of her projects, and I was so proud about some of my projects that I still save some of those till this day. But I'm very grateful for that class. I'm glad I had the teacher I had. The following year, if I remember right, I had her husband. And in 12th grade, I had her husband again. He was the teacher for the, I guess, more advanced classes. Yeah. Now that I think about it, I'm like, wow, I survived this guy's classes twice. Maybe that's why I'm tough, because they have lecturing tendencies. I think they used to be college professors. I thought that their style of teaching was pretty difficult because it just seemed like they were rambling on forever. And I'm like, okay, at what point do we get out the piece of paper and start doing work and things like that? That time never came. It was, read this, I have this worksheet for you, and we'll discuss it afterward. And I'm like, you're harping on about this segment for the entire class, and there's more questions here that we haven't gone over, and the test is on Friday and today is Wednesday. What? So yeah, I was kind of shedding myself in them two's classes. Geometry, I finished that with an 87 and I was surprised. Oh, I guess I should say English 10 college prep, I ended it with a 98. Civics and economics, I ended it with a 99. I don't remember if I said that. Geometry, I ended with an 87. I was super proud that I ended geometry with an 87 because I thought that I was going to inherit mom's curse I want to say she said she passed geometry with a C. There was another class she said that she passed with a D. I don't remember which one it was, or maybe geometry was the D, the other class was the C. Anyway, I think she said a C for geometry. And I was so proud of myself because I was prepared to see my grade in this class in the 70s. But I did not give up. I always asked questions. I had my different colored pens. I had my pencils, my notebooks. I asked questions every single time, and the teacher would answer. And after class, if I had a couple of minutes, I would be like, do you have like an extra couple of minutes so that we can go over this real quick? Or in the morning, sometimes this teacher could get there a little early. And I was there sitting outside at the hallway by the door. Like as soon as the teacher arrived, I would be like, I was confused about some of our problems in our homework. Do you have time? Is it a good time? Please help me. But I swear I tried. Stuff like that. And then I remember maybe 2 occasions I stayed after school and he helped me. For me to have made an 87 on something I was just fucking hopeless with and frustrated by, and I was aware of my shortcomings, it was lit. I wanted to throw a party. I guess at age 15, I wanted to get drunk in celebration. So that made me super proud. Spanish 2, I made a 96, and it was because this one involved more serious work, like more writing, more reading, more speaking, that type of thing. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm actually being challenged in this class. It actually worked out well for me. And it was an honors class, meaning that it had like more weight to the GPA ultimately. Maybe that's what made it feel challenging. There was biology. Biology is one that I had to downgrade from. I was taking biology honors, but I downgraded to the normal biology class because I was experiencing difficulties with that teacher. Nothing personal, nothing bad, no fights, nothing. It's just that I wasn't understanding her teaching style. And everybody had complaints about her, but I always said, y'all always hating on teachers. I had my reservations, but some classmates who I respected were saying that, and then I thought, okay, let me still show up, give it a shot, evaluate it for myself. And yeah, I said to myself, it's been 4 days in this class, and if this is the dynamic I'm going to experience for the rest of the semester, this is not going to end well for me. So I spoke to my guidance counselor. She agreed that this was probably what's best for me because she has heard of those things being said about this teacher, and we did not hesitate. I was placed in the slower version of biology, and I had the nicest, kindest, sweetest, best teacher I could have asked for. I ended that class with a 96. Big difference. Computer Applications 1, a 98. That class meant a lot to me because I had a great teacher. And not only did I have a great teacher, but we were legitimately learning about computer stuff in a better way. I felt like I was more productive in that class than in middle school computer classes, because middle school computer classes revolved more around your keyboarding skills. But when it comes to actually using spreadsheets and databases, we learned about a little bit of that, but it wasn't very deep. It wasn't very intense. But this class, I guess it took that and it really cranked it up. I was so proud of the works I had done in Publisher. And I have this one poster that I still have saved somewhere to this day that I made using I want to say it was Publisher. Back in the good old days when we had Publisher. And I was so proud of how it turned out because I had my colors. I used that special printer for that. And I put it together. And that was actually a mistake. I was supposed to have printed it into one portrait formatted sheet. Then I was supposed to turn it landscape and have it fill the entire page. But instead it printed 4 corners. So what I did is, as opposed to having the teacher help me reprint them, I was like, how about this? I took those pieces and I trimmed the little bit of a white edge that they had printed out with, and I taped them together, and I put a board behind them, and I pretty much turned it into a poster frame. And then the teacher was like, that is a very good idea. The coloring wasn't very even, of course, but at least the whole picture was visible. And I said, I just feel so bad that I wasted these 4 sheets, and now I'm getting ready to waste one more. And this is colored ink. We know that colored ink be up there in price. I got to do that. But computer apps one involved very little attention to keyboarding, and it was mostly about you typing documents, the format being correct, the indentations being correct, just that, the format of it being the right one. Attention to fonts, learning about the design principles, design elements, how to make things look neat as opposed to overwhelming and goofy and all that. And I thought, this class is perfect. I want to take computer apps too, because even though I hate computers, this is cool. But computer apps never happened for me because of schedule conflicts. But anyway, lovely class. French 1. I ended that class with a 97. And let me tell you, me making a 97 in French is a big deal, because French for me has been unnecessarily hard, especially the pronunciation side of it. And I want to say the 3 points that I lost in this class came a little bit from that. This teacher was intense with the workload, not in a cruel way, but she had her specifications. She wasn't really as forgiving about certain mistakes, because she's the kind who's like, you're in this class, you're going to study this, you're going to learn it, and you're going to get it right. When it comes to spelling, writing, and sentence structures, I made hundreds or 99s, because maybe I would forget an accent mark. I was so proud of my French performance. But when it was time to speak it, for the life of me, I just could not. I guess I got by with writing because at the time, my photographic memory was no joke. It was like I could see the study guide I had, and it's like I could close my eyes, open them up, and I would see the after image of this paper. And I want to say that's how I got by in this class. But I'll never forget that my French teacher said, if you survive my class, you can survive anything. I have been called that Asian man with the mustache before. I thought, why would someone call you the Asian man name when you're not mean, you're not bad, you're none of that? This class is not hard, but I guess if you're not focused and if you're not serious, then it will be hard. But nothing about this class was overwhelming. But that's when I discovered that I genuinely have pronunciation problems that to this day persist. But I'm not too hard on myself because I ultimately don't practice French. Yeah, this is when I discovered that French is not like Spanish. Like Spanish, I feel like everybody can make an A and 100 in this class. But in French, this was different. This was a different animal. And then finally, my last class was Theater Arts 1. I made 100% in that class. Theater is one of those, just like PE. If you don't make 100 in that class, you're not trying to make 100 in that class. And the most valuable thing I learned in theater was about projection. I wasn't very good at memorizing my lines because I would get nervous. Like I could rehearse lines, but they would be very monotone. I needed a lot of direction. And there was one part where I needed to have my line said to me as I was in the middle of my performance. I guess I discovered that I wouldn't be a very good actress like I thought I would be, because I may have the expressiveness in my body, my face, and all that. But when it comes to my projection of lines, projection of dialogue, I'm not very natural. You can tell that I'm working hard at remembering the script. And because I'm mentally reading off the script, my acting suffers because I'm thinking about how to get the script perfectly expressed, but my body is not moving along with the script. I needed a more direct coaching, a more direct direction. So maybe if I had that, I would feel better about myself. But then I said, you know what? Maybe I'm not meant to be an actress. I'm meant to be authentic. I'm meant to be me. I'm meant to be the script and not me adjusting, adapting to the script. So that was my 10th grade. My 11th grade, it was one of my happier years, but not as happy as my senior year. I took advanced PE and I made 100%. And what advanced PE meant was that you were actually, as opposed to having health and PE at the same time, this was only a PE class. And it mostly revolved around the teacher telling you, okay, do laps. It didn't matter if you ran them, jogged them, walked them. As long as you did it, it didn't matter. Doing stadiums. It doesn't matter if you run them, skip them, do a step, take a breath for 5 seconds, another step, take another breath. As long as you complete it, you're fine. At some point, as filler, when my teacher, I guess, didn't really have a plan, we would go to the basketball court and you could just play basketball as long as you were playing, doing something, and not just sitting around. You got the 100, and you better believe I used every second I had playing basketball. If I got my hands on a ball, I always spent my entire time just working on shooting. And I got so good at shooting pretty much from anywhere on the court, including like half court, that my teacher was like calling me basketball girl, and he was like, you should really try out for the team because the way you can shoot from anywhere in the court is pretty impressive. And I'm like, well, no, because I'm definitely not very athletic. I wear glasses, and my mom is probably not gonna be able to afford that. And in the grand scheme of things, I'm good at shooting, but I don't have any offense or defense. I don't really know the rules of basketball like that well. You just saw that superficially I can throw this ball and make it into the basket because that's something I have always been able to do. Like as a kid, I have always had the ability of throwing things and making them hit goals, or darts, same thing. I wasn't that great at it at first, but I kept practicing and practicing and practicing to a point that somehow I got good at it. But that was 20 years ago. I doubt that I can still do that. But that is always something I've been able to do, even down to rifles. I once practiced with an air rifle, and I could shoot bottle caps from, I never knew that distance numerically, but I could find them in like a forested background. This is with me wearing glasses too. Shoot them and hit them. And of course, I had the assistance of a scope, but I'm pretty sure that if I had instruction and practice on how to do it without a scope, I'm pretty sure I could get it too. That's just an ability I have always had. Something about measuring things visually and making shit happen. That's something I've always been pretty good at. Chemistry, I made a 95, and it was surprising because that is probably the lowest grade I had ever had in a science class at that point. But I was surprised that I made an A at all because that class was hard. It wasn't even the advanced version. And don't you worry, I will tell you about advanced chemistry in a little bit. But this class, I just remember feeling frustrated that it wasn't what I expected, I guess. And I was also sad that it's a chemistry class, but we're not doing a lot of experiments. A lot of the stuff I learned in high school, it was just paper written. There wasn't a lot of hands-on experience, a lot of hands-on projects. I guess at the time, I adapted to being a visual learner to survive, but in my adult years, I discovered that I'm actually more of a kinesthetic learner. The more I do, the better I retain. But these classes that I saw my grades beginning to lower a little bit, I felt like maybe it was because I was evolving. My learning style was something that needed adjustment. it needed to be catered to and modified, but how do I express that? How do I tell somebody, hey, the way that you're teaching doesn't go for me, doesn't work well for me. This is what you have to do instead. I can't do that. Even if teachers asked, what is your learning style? I always said visual slash auditory because I could remember pretty much everything they said. But in reality, for my pure retention, absolute utter retention, I needed to do things. And back then, I didn't know that about myself because our classes tended to be more for visual learners as opposed to kinesthetic learners. English 3, I made a 97, and this one, it was, you could say it was American English. This was an easier-ish class because we were pretty much learning about our folks or contemporaries from that time. We went pretty deep with folks like Edgar Allan Poe and God, I forgot that lady's name. Is there an Angelina? Anyway, the caged bird lady, whatever her name is, I forgot already. Maya Angelou. Was she the one who wrote that one? We had poets that we really got deeper into. That was the whole point of this class. It was more about celebrating the American composers and authors and all that. It wasn't my favorite class. I found it pretty boring. But at least I got to write a lot, and writing was always my favorite thing to do. Music Theory 2, I made a 96. English 3, I made a 97. And in music, I made a 96. What made me sad about Music Theory 2 was that the previous year, I should have taken Music Theory 2 because we had a class dedicated for music theory. Like the whole period was dedicated for music theory. But I didn't. And some of my classmates who were in Music Theory 1 were like, come on, sign up for Music Theory 2. That way we can take it together. This and that. I kind of regret that a little bit because when I took Music Theory 2, only 4 or 5 of us signed up, but we didn't want to cancel the class. We were incorporated with the freshmen taking Music Theory 1, and they were a fucking rowdy group of people. And my teacher would pretty much divide her attention between teaching the basics to Music Theory 1, which to me it served as a review when I could tune into it, and then our little corner of us being Music Theory 2, she would give us our assignments, explain it to us, then be like, whatever you get confused with, the Theory 1 class is working with something similar, you'll be able to pretty much make the connection. And fortunately, behind me, I had someone who was the cousin of one of my classmates I had in Music Theory 1, and they legit know about music. They were pianists, they took classes. And I was able to turn around and ask her about anything that I was confused with, and she was super helpful. But I'm just devastated that I didn't get to indulge in a class that was focused on this. I had a split focus class. But again, my teacher was amazing. My teacher was great. She had like over 30 years of experience. She was awesome. She was cool. But for someone like me, I wish I would have taken Music Theory 2 the previous year. But I guess the reason I didn't is because I remember what Music Theory 1 was and how I wanted a more instrument focused class. And I knew Music Theory 2 was not going to be that. That's why I took that gap year in music and came back in my junior year. But again, I'm sad that it worked out like that because that gap year, you could tell that I kind of forgot some concepts. And it wasn't a very easy transition from Music Theory 1 to 2, given that I had that gap year. And I've never been like a Mozart in music, right? That one, I have good memories about. Frustrated by how the young people acted fucking stupid. There was this one kid who drove my teacher up a wall. I had never seen her physically upset. But, that guy was like the Jack Doherty of our class. He had Jack Doherty hair too. And his name started with a J too. It sucked. But I'm grateful that I took the class. Whatever I did, I carry it with me. Algebra 2, I made a 94. This teacher wasn't bad. She wasn't the best either, but she was more good than bad. And I guess she learned to respect me when she saw how much effort I would put into things. She saw that I had my different color pens, my different notebooks, different papers. And the reason I say it like that is because I can't remember what happened, but we did have a moment of differences in her class. And it's not that she got mad at me or I got mad at her, nothing like that. It was more of, I guess there was a segment, a chapter that I was really falling behind with. And I'm someone who I do not give up on myself. If I don't understand something, I'm going to ask my questions. I'm going to inquire as many times as I need to until I feel like I get it. And I guess my teacher learned to respect me for being that challenging student. But I also think that she also respected me more because she became aware that outside of her class, I was doing what I needed to do well in her class. I was talking to other math teachers that I had had before and be like, so in my Algebra 2 class, we're talking about this and I don't get it. Can you help me? I got the help that I needed and I succeeded. And I want to say that initially my Algebra 2 teacher may have been a little salty about that, how I was going to them as opposed to her. And I said, nothing personal. It's just that the way that you break this down and explain it doesn't align with me. And I'm taking what you're showing us and teaching us and getting reinforcement elsewhere. Don't be jealous, whatever that was. But at the end, we were cool. Like the next year, my senior year, I would see her down the hallway and she would say hi. I would say hi. No animosity there. But I remember being proud that in a high school level math class, I scored an A. Whereas, up until this point in Algebra 1, I made a B, 90, and then geometry, I made an 87. It looked like I was going down in my math scores, but in this class, hey, I made it with a low A, but I made it. Marketing, I made a 97. I remember the teacher. I remember the class-ish. And I remember that it was mostly about making posters because, of course, it's marketing. It was super simple, super easy because it's such a common sense class. There's no such thing as learning vocabulary words in that class. It's just everyday words, but they introduce them to you in an organized way, of course. I hated that class because it was boring to me. How do you present something to sell it to people? How do you design ads? And I hate ads. They don't tend to work on me. Why would I create something that I don't believe in to push to people? But I'm still grateful I took this class because with the knowledge from this class, I was able to start my job and be like, I see hints of my marketing class everywhere. So I guess this class is there to stay with me for the rest of my life. And I guess you could say that creators on these social media platforms, this is what they do, marketing. What thumbnail can I have to draw your attention? What clothes should I wear or not to hold on to your attention? And I'm the opposite of that. I don't do that. It's if you're interested in the title of the video that you see, you're going to click on it. If you're not, then you're not. If you want to watch for 30 seconds, that's all you can take. If you want to watch for the whole, this video is already clocking in at 43 minutes. If you want to sit here for the whole thing, then you do, period. Anyway, there was that. And then I took psychology and I made a 93. What I remember being tough about this class was the exercises. Like say, it wasn't just book work, because I can do that all day. I can define words, I can retain vocabulary, I can take tests, all that. But when it was time to arrange a presentation, that is where I started losing some points. And I was surprised that I almost made a B in that class. I was 1 point away from making a B in that class. That teacher was my favorite teacher of all time. I remember him fondly. US History Honors, I made a 98. And I remember this teacher because he could speak Italian. He signed my yearbook written in Italian. What I liked about this class is that you could tell, was legit passionate about the subject. He would drop facts on you all the time, and he would tell things how it is. Sometimes he would be like, so your book is talking about the Trail of Tears in this manner, but please consider the brutality of what this actually meant, blah blah blah, things like that. He wasn't trying to keep it PG or sugarcoat it. And sometimes he would talk like this and whisper things because he knew that if administration walked by and heard him, he could get in trouble. I appreciated that about him. He had guts. And there was one kid who was one of my middle school classmates, but we never had any high school classes together. And he was one of them popular kids. He talked about our teacher, saying that he hated him and hated the class. And that hurt my teacher because it's this popular, well-liked kid, respected kid for some reason. And for him to know that he was hated by this kid, it was just sad. And what was sad is that this kid, the previous year, he lost his brother in a car accident. And his brother was older than him. He was only 17. I can understand why he may have shown a little bit of a dark side briefly, but there was nothing wrong with this teacher. I can tell you that. Nothing wrong at all. And he would make jokes. They were super funny. And that is the end of my 11th grade. Now we can transition onto my senior year, and this was the happiest year I had in school. I want to say my most depressed year was probably 10th grade and then 9th grade. But I can't tell you. I feel like 9th grade began just fine. I was excited. I'm like, I'm in high school, this and that. But that is when the symptoms of my depression began. And I guess by 10th grade, they developed, they manifested. So to me, my 10th grade was emotionally a sadder year than my 9th grade. Even though my 9th grade, especially second semester, had its sad times, but it wasn't as bad. And then my junior year, I was, you could say, recovering. First semester was a tad bit rough, but by second semester, I was certainly more optimistic. And my senior year, I just remembered that it was great. And it was so good that I'm like, is there such thing as a 13th grade? I need another year of high school, especially to take computer apps to a class that I didn't get to take. Advanced Functions and Modeling. That was my math class, the first class of the day. Fortunately, I had a great teacher. I looked at it as, well, I guess the bitter pill to swallow goes first. And my teacher was like, I have a feeling that when I explain things to you, you're going to understand my class. And by that point, my math self-esteem was kind of low, but also kind of high since I had made an A the previous year. But my teacher was absolutely right. I ended this class with a 97, and it was because I remember telling her I never understood logarithms. And she said, logarithms are simply the inversion of an exponent. My universe fell apart. Like it was shattered. But as she began to explain it, it's like a new reality started to be built up for me. And I was ended. I never recovered from that. But I also remember that when I was getting intimidated by something, or some of my classmates were like, oh, we're going to talk about angles and things. That's never made sense to me. It is so hard. And my teacher said, not when Mrs. last name explains it. And when she said that, I was like, I can't wait to hear this, because so far so good. Everything that she's shown me, explained and broken down, I have understood it. I'm making a pretty nice grade. And I just loved her demeanor, loved her attitude. She was like a 50-something already, but she looked pretty good. She looked more like she was in her early 40s. And one of my classmates made that comment. She was like, you look so much younger than 51 whatever she was. And my teacher was like, oh, I feel it. That kind of attitude, it just made me feel like this is a teacher who's excited about being here, and I know that I can pester her all day long with questions, and she will not make me feel some type of way. That class, I will forever retain those memories. Concert choir, that's pretty much a singing class. I made a 98, and this was what I wanted music to be. Music theory, I wanted it to be singing or playing an instrument. This is the class that I needed. And I'm sad that I didn't take it sooner, like say my freshman year or something like that. I think that you needed to have one class as a prerequisite though, if I remember right. But this class was very meaningful for me because I have always wanted to learn how to sing. And although I didn't succeed at it, I learned how to take what I had learned about music theory up until that point, try to use my voice as an instrument. That meant a lot to me. I didn't have a keyboard. I didn't have a single instrument that I could practice with, put anything that I was learning into practice, a flute, nothing. Taking this class was the closest I got to a formal music instruction outside of 7th grade when I took a music class and we had like keyboards. But this one was a very influential class for me, and I got to be the homecoming representative for the chorus. And I have pictures, but I can't find the little sash that I wore. It looked like shit anyway, but I remember thinking, I'm going places in my senior year. And of course, in the yearbook, there's a page where that took place. Of course, I wasn't homecoming queen. Thank God I wasn't shooting for that. But I was glad that for the first time in my life, I was achieving something within school. And my teacher was very nice. She had an order of flowers be mailed to my house. And to me, that just meant a lot. I have had this teacher 3 times. I want to say she's the teacher I had most often in school. Environmental Science AP. I made a 96. I don't play with science classes. That class was kind of rough. It was pretty difficult. It was the hardest science class I had ever taken. And the teacher I had, he had been a professor. He had a PhD. And I just remember thinking, there's nothing wrong with the way he's teaching. He's being matter-of-factly. But I feel like this is my first class ever that I've been introduced to a science concepts. I felt like I was falling behind. You had to do math, calculations, and that type of shit. And I'm like, I don't understand any of this. I'm going to fail this class. This is going to be the first science class I make like a C in. But my teacher never gave up on me. He was like, if you're ever confused about any of this, let me know and we'll find a way to work around it. And basically what he meant is if there was an assignment that, say, involved a lot of math, he'd be like, okay, no problem, do what you can, and whatever you don't get, we'll go over it during class or after class, and then maybe you'll get it. And he was right. I was beginning to understand some of those things. And what was killing me is that there were segments in which an advanced math understanding would have been preferable, something like calculus. And I never ever took that class, not even an introductory level of it. But at least it was very brief. He was like, I'm showing you this concept, not because it's a requirement for my class, but because it's pertinent for what you're learning. And I knew that I wasn't going to take the AP exam, even though he wanted me to take the AP exam. And I'm like, I'm telling you, I know the truth about my performance in this class. The only thing I'm excelling at is, say, how do you resolve an oil spill? And what are the obstacles you may encounter? Regulation, cost. I can talk all day long about that shit. This class was more a political class, more than learning facts about science, more than learning about, say, landforms, chemical reactions. This was a politics written class. I can do that. I can argue all day long. I can come up with ideas all day long. I'm just not an engineer. So when this class was taking a more engineering approach, like say, okay, how do you invent the technology or the solution for this environmental problem? My only answer was always, you just avoid the disaster from happening in the first place. And then my teacher would counter it with something like, well, you cannot just take that as the ultimate answer because that's going to cause humanity to stop advancing. And I'm like, but how is it worth it for humanity to keep advancing if we keep destroying our environment? And he was like, well, that's why you have to come up with engineering, with solutions. You have to engineer things that are going to make it possible for humankind to continue this shit, continue inventing, but not in a way to where we destroy our planet. And, at that point, I'm like, this is the perfect class for me. It's just the wrong topic, you could say, because when it comes to science, I'm very simple. I just believe that we should be out here like savages and animals, let nature do its thing. But of course, humanity can't accept that. We have advanced way too far. The only way that's going to happen is if we just collectively decide to let it collapse, let it burn. But quest for power, all that shit. But this was a very good class. This class influenced my mentality differently because after I took this class, that's when I began to become more involved in politics. I began to tune in to things like the elections. I tried to learn more about economics, corporate greed, things like that. Everything about this class began to make sense when I started looking at things like the EPA and the things that may be wrong with them, the things that they get right, things like that. And I learned also about food and the food processing and how that's causing issues on us humans. It was a very impactful class. Teacher Cadets, I made 100%. Teacher Cadets was a course designed for any individual who was expressing interest in becoming a teacher after high school. And I took it very seriously. I remember this class. It was my favorite class thus far because I remember that I got to talk. I got to talk to my peers. We all had something in common. And I got to talk to my teacher. And my teacher was saying that every time I would say something, I had a pretty deep insights and that she was grateful that I was sharing my thoughts. But she wished that I did that a little more. And I said, well, I'm not going to share an opinion unless I'm invited to do so, unless it's requested from me. And basically, we were discussing the shit that we see on social media, the collapse of school and kids' apathy, teachers quitting, how it's overwhelming because you don't get paid a lot, the challenges specific to our state. We discussed all of that, and every single thing that we went over in that class has happened. So it's one of those classes that made me be like, I gotta make a choice here. The choice is stick to my plan of not going to college because the only feasible thing for me would be to be a teacher. But I gotta accept that my life is going to suck and I witnessed what it did to my mom. So do I really want that? And it also served as a premonition of what I could expect society to look like. And I cannot imagine a life being a teacher in which I'm just utterly disrespected. I think I would have quit the profession maybe within the first 2 years. And then I'm stuck with my student loans. They don't get forgiven. And where would I be right now if I would have chosen that path? And another aspect of teacher cadets was seeing that my classmates also had similar views, but those who couldn't pursue this couldn't do it because they were motivated by other things. And you have a right to feel that way, to want those things. But this is one of those sacrificial professions where you really gotta be in it because you believe in the importance of this for society, but your community also has to support you. teachers can be successful only if they're supported to be successful. The individual child is interested in learning, they get learning support from home, and the school also reinforces that. Administration reinforces that. In this class, I'll never forget it. It was influential with speaking, explaining things, how to properly bring up concerns, issues, debates. I love that class. For some reason here, there is something called AP seminar, and it has the letter P as my grade and a 0 as a score. And I don't remember that at all. I don't remember that just being a dead class, dead space for me. Maybe whatever happened there is semester for AP. It says incomplete, NovaNet. I don't remember that at all. Oh, I remember it now. This used to be my third period. This was pretty much a class in which it was so depressing. It wasn't a class. It was just a dead period in which you were supposed to take this class and you had time to do homework. And I remember telling myself, I want to speak to someone like a counselor or administration, just someone to see if I could be put in a class where I can actually be taking a class. Let me take computer apps, but I couldn't because either this was my teacher's dead time for computer apps or she had to teach a different class instead. Anyway, that opportunity was gone. And whatever other class I can't remember right now that I may have wanted to take, it was just not available. Like I couldn't fit into that schedule. So this was a period of you working on homework or meditating, whatever the fuck you wanted to do. Some problem kids were there, but they weren't being rowdy or anything. It's just they were there and they were getting some coaching. And I hated that because I want to say my GPA was not higher because this class literally did not contribute to it. I made a 0, but it didn't add nor take away from my GPA. But I look at it as it took away because had I had a class in which I performed well and it added to my GPA, I would have been fine. I remember where this classroom is now. I just don't remember who was there. I don't remember who the teacher was, who was filling it in. I just remember the classroom. It was always pretty dimly lit. And sometimes there was just nothing to do. And ultimately, I ended my school career with a weighted GPA of 4.16 and an unweighted GPA of 3.8. And my class rank was number 47 out of 326. And I think that is super sad because I remember when my class began, say freshman year, we were like 500 and something kids. But every year that number started dwindling. 326 is not a lot for a graduating class in our town. But we also had 2 high schools. Some folks from my school transferred to the other school. Maybe because it was newer, people like fresh, shiny things. I said, I'm not going to that school. I want to be at this one because this school is older. An older institution felt more stable for me than a new one. Not to discredit whatever they could have achieved in that other class. I'm just saying that for me, also the close proximity to my home, this was the better sense response. And then here I also have information on my immunizations. I had no idea that they took this information until I received my transcript. I'm like, y'all have my medical record, vaccination record from all the way back to when I was 2 months old. Wow. Some of these I don't even know what that is. But I have the vaccine for it. But wait, there's more. After AP seminar, that weird non-class, I took chemistry 2, second year, AP. I made an 86 in that class. That is like a low B. I got destroyed in this class. No, I didn't take the AP. Yeah, I should have probably downgraded to chemistry honors or something. But I took this class particularly because everybody was saying good stuff about this teacher. And I said to myself, if I didn't understand chemistry 1, chemistry 2 should push me and challenge me because I refused to accept that I walked out of a science class not feeling like I learned, not feeling satisfied. This was that class. It made me feel much worse about myself, but at least, even though I made that B, I can see how it contributed to my GPA because it still gave me an extra couple of points. It wasn't too bad, but it's not like it really made it shine either. I want to say that maybe this AP seminar class was necessary for this chemistry too, but I don't remember getting a ton of assistance in this AP seminar class. Yeah, chemistry 2 was difficult. It was just hard. It was taking everything from the previous year and amplifying it. And I remember one experiment we worked on, I accidentally burnt myself. I forget the name of the solution. I'm disappointed that I forget, but whatever it was blue. English 4, once again, I had the same teacher as the previous year, which is the husband to the teacher from my sophomore year. And English 4 is essentially British English. It was nothing but Old English, Middle English, Modern English, the differences, the stories like your Beowulfs, your Macbeths, and all that, and the Romeo and Juliet, Capulet, whatever they're called, and Montagues, whatever they were. Like, isn't that their surnames, their family names? And wait, was Romeo and Juliet from my senior year or my junior year? I don't fucking remember. I don't care. I just know that this class was super hard whenever we went over the Old English stuff. And there were many references to Scandinavia. I don't remember why. I remember something called Sir Gawain, and the Green Knight. I just remember that the knight had a green hue. His body was actually green, but I don't remember shit about that story. Yeah, this class was painful, and I made a 95. Not bad, not great, but I find that when we were heading into the modern version of this class, that's when I rebounded. When it comes to Middle English, I don't remember it that well. I just remember that. Fuck it, I don't remember shit. I also remember something called Hrunting. I think that was the name of someone's sword. It was like Hrungting. I don't know, you guys. I think there was a story of someone. I can't remember if this dude was from Norway or Denmark. Anyway, it was someone, and he had this giant sword and some monster he was trying to like fight off the village, but ultimately this monster ended up owning him, and he died because he got very old and he couldn't fight quite like when he was young. I think this monster was a dragon. Anyway, wherever this happened, it was supposed to be a very cold place. It sounds like Scandinavia to me, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure if this was a Danish dude or a Finnish dude. It was someone from out there. I swear, you guys, I'm not making this shit up. And the reason I remember that so much is because I remember telling myself, how am I supposed to pronounce these words? there's an A with a circle above it, a degree symbol above it. What is that? And then there were also other symbols and letters, and to me it was a language that looked choppy. I was appalled at myself. I thought that this class was made to troll me. And then finally, I challenged myself by taking Spanish level 5 AP, and I made a 98. That's the one class that helped me with my self-esteem, because I thought this is an AP class that I'm taking, that I'm legitimately going to challenge myself and try to take the AP exam. I took it and I made the highest score obtainable. Is it a 5? A 4? I forget how AP tests are measured. But when I saw that score, I thought, I'm so proud of myself, because my strategy for this was, especially when it came to the speaking part, that's the part that worried me. I said to myself, I gotta slow down. I gotta maybe pre-write my responses if I can. And that should help me express myself clearly. I think clarity was the most important thing. So I just said to myself, I can pronounce, I can divide syllables, I can enunciate. This is something I learned in my choir class, which is you actually move your mouth and lips, even if you have to exaggerate it. This is what brings henceforth clarity. And yeah, I was surprised that I did as well as I did, because there were some parts that seemed a little tricky. But when I broke it down into smaller pieces, it felt simpler. So then I thought to myself, ooh, I'm ready to conquer Spain instead of Spain conquering the rest of us back in those good old days. Boom. That's it. That concludes my high school career. That's it from me. Thank you so much for tuning in as I go down memory lane. I promise that I will look for my elementary school and middle school ones, because I just want to see how far it takes me, how far back it takes me, what I remember, what I don't. And yeah, this was quite a nice exercise. It helped me feel excitement. This was a influential season in my life, of course. It is for everybody. And reminiscing on it means a lot, because now my memories of it are beginning to fade. And I always thought, as soon as I graduated, I thought, I'm never gonna forget this. I'm gonna remember everything and everybody. And now when I look at this paper, I remember what it was like when I freshly received it. I remember a year after I received it, but now after many more years after that, looking at it now, I'm like, fuck, I don't remember. So I guess we can say that I was right. I made nothing but A's and B's. But anyway, ultimately, I was able to piece some shit together. Okay, that's it. Bye.